Soti and welcome to our weekly online Dhamma group where we study together Buddhist texts. Venerable Dhamma as always kindly joins us from Sri Lanka to give us context, explanation and answer our questions as we read. In Sri Lanka where he's residing there's currently going renovations for the meditation center for those that don't know, and there will be more space and better opportunities for taking retreats if you're interested. We're currently reading the Discourses by the late Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw on the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, which he gave on different occasions 63 years ago, and which are compiled into one book. It was translated by U Kole and edited by Venerable Bhikkhu Pesala. After 1 hour of reading, we will stop and have time for discussions and asking questions. Now, before we begin, we will request Refuge in the Triple Gem and the 5 precepts from Venerable Dhamma. Everyone is welcome to take part in this wholesome deed and recite with us. Is there someone in the Discord reading group who would kindly lead the 5 precepts for us? Okay, otherwise I will do it today. So, I will start now. Ahang Bante, Tisaranena Saha Pancha Silani Yachami. Tutiyampi Ahang Bante, Tisaranena Saha Pancha Silani Yachami. Tatiyampi Ahang Bante, Tisaranena Saha Pancha Silani Yachami.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Buddhang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dhammang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Sanghang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tutiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tutiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Dutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tutiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi buddhang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi dhammang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Tatiyampi sanghang saranang gacchami.
Saranagamanang nititang.
Ama Bante.
Parnatipata Veramani Sikkhapadang Samadhiyami.
ปานาติปาตาเวรมณีสิกขาปดังสมาธิยามิ
ดินนาดานาเวรมณีสิกขาปดังสมาดิยามิ
อดินนาดานาเวรมณีสิกขาปดังสมาธิยามิ
กาเมสุมิจฉาจาราเวรมณีสิกขาปดังสมาดิยามิ
กาเมสุมิจฉาจาราเวรมณีสิกขาปดังสมาธิยามิ
มุสาวาดาเวรมณีสิกขาปดังสมาดิยามิ
มุสาวาดาเวรมณีสิกขาปดังสมาธิยามิ
สุราเมรยะมัจจปมาดฐานาเวรมณีสิกขาปดังสมาดิยามิ
สุราเมรยมัจจปมาดฐานาเวรมณีสิกขาปดังสมาธิยามิ
อิมานิปัญจสิกขาปดานิสีเลนะสุกติยันติสีเลนะโภกสัมปทาสีเลนะนิพุติยันอาสีลังวิโสดา
สาธุสาธุสาธุ
สาธุสาธุสาธุ
So today we will continue with page 44 in the PDF book, and it starts with how to avoid the two extremes. As always, please remember to read about 2 paragraphs. If they are short, you can read one more, and to take pauses between each paragraph, so there's time for questions or explanations. And today I thought we could do it alphabetically and just continue next time with the last person as we did it before. So, Chi, then you would start for us today.
Okay, I'll start now. How to avoid the two extremes. When the 5 sense objects, namely sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch, those objects that would not violate observance of the precepts or which would be helpful to the practice of Dhamma, may be enjoyed. Eating suitable food and wearing suitable clothing contributes to the comfortable practice of the Dhamma, thus avoiding the extreme austerity of self-mortification. Necessary material goods such as
Stop
food.
after each paragraph, okay?
Yeah.
Let's take a pause so we have time if anyone has questions and so on. So the word enjoyed is has to be understood probably for me. But we have an issue with this word in English as well. Because even in English that is okay, that's not objectionable. However, it can easily be misunderstood or understood in a way that isn't objectionable. If you say you can enjoy these things, it's in English there's a manner of speaking which that just means you can partake of them. But because we use the word enjoyed in that way, but literally to enjoy something is problematic. He's not saying enjoyable sights are things you should seek out or you should cultivate enjoyment of them, because the word enjoyment really does mean liking it. And it's as he said before, for lay people we can't tell them not to. So it's not that we're policing this, but it's important from a theoretical point of view to understand that enjoying them is liking. And so not just technically, practically, that's a problem, a very small problem, but it's not good. It's not to be encouraged. Not that we police it or that we denounce people for enjoying good food or so on. But during the moment of eating, if you're enjoying it, what that means is you're liking it. The word enjoy, we only use that word in that context when there's liking in the mind. So you can say all you want, I'm enjoying it, but I'm not liking it. Enjoyment is liking, and liking is a hindrance. It's craving, and it's conducive to attachment. It leads directly to attachment, and is for the cause of seeking out, the cause of ultimately suffering as an inevitable result. And when you're dissatisfied and clingy, needy, need things and can't get them whenever you want. And when you get something that's not them, or the opposite of them, then you're disappointed, you're upset, frustrated, annoyed, even angry. So please understand correctly, when they say the word enjoyment here, enjoyed, it really just means you can partake of them. Really should be not inclined to enjoy, but if you are enjoying it, it means you're liking it, and it's not something you should be upset about. You should just make sure you're noting that as well carefully. When you like food, not the eating the food that's a problem. You shouldn't avoid food that you like. You should just be noting the tasting, and if you end up liking it, the liking.
I'll continue. Necessary material goods such as food, clothing, medicine, and shelter should be used, accompanied either by wise reflection or the practice of concentration or insight meditation. Every time contact is made with the five sense objects, they should be noted as objects of insight meditation by adopting a reflective mood, or by noting the sense objects as objects of insight meditation. Partaking of necessary food, clothes, does not develop into enjoying them with delight or pleasure, thereby avoiding the other extreme of sensual indulgence. The Blessed One therefore declared, having avoided these two extreme practices, I have understood the middle path.
Antidote for indigestible food. Wise reflection or insight meditation amount to the development of mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom, which are factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. It is like taking antidotes after taking indigestible, unsuitable food. A convalescent after a serious illness has to be careful about his diet. He has to avoid the wrong kind of food, which might be harmful. If he can't resist the temptation to take unsuitable, indigestible food, he has to take digestive medicine to counteract the harmful effects of the food he has taken. In this way, he could satisfy his desire to eat what he wants, and at the same time avoid getting the bad effects from it. Similarly, by reflecting on the material goods we use, or by noting them as objects of meditation, we have prevented the development of sensual indulgence. For the meditator who notes every time he or she sees, hears, touches, or cognizes, and understands the nature of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and not-self in every phenomenon that arises and vanishes, greed and hatred cannot develop concerning objects that have been cognized. When using any of the four essential requisites, food, clothing, medicine, and shelter, if one notes every time they are used, no defilements can develop in connection with them. Thus, one can make use of the four requisites to abide in comfort while avoiding the development of delight and pleasure through wise reflection and insight meditation. In this way, the two extremes are avoided. Wise reflection and insight meditation, while taking food or using other requisites, amounts to practicing the middle path.
With this practice of the middle path, by noting every object appearing at the six sense doors, thereby knowing their true nature, vision will arise, the eye of wisdom will open up, leading to the realization of Nibbana. Such are the benefits that accrue from following the middle path. The Buddha continued to explain the middle path understood penetratingly by the Tathagata produces vision, produces knowledge.
His phrasing of the of the middle way in that last paragraph is really important and valuable. So we know this common misconception about the middle way as being moderation, and he makes an important point here, because the middle way looks like moderation, and there's a reason why it looks like moderation. So when you talk about using the requisites, one way would be to forbid yourself from good food, and by good I mean even wholesome food, food that is good for you. That would be one way, but you take the most coarse and rough and unpleasant food possible, and that would be potentially torturing yourself. I mean, it really would be. It's hard to see that it wouldn't be. In any way you look at it, if you're doing that, you're purposefully doing something that makes you suffer, physically even, thinking that there's some benefit to that. The other way would be to seek out food that you enjoy. Seek out food that tastes good, food that you likes, and of course, obviously, that is engaging in sensual pleasure. It's pretty clear. Now, why is it that when you practice the middle way, it's kind of the middle of those two? Right? We think, okay, well, that's the middle way. When you say, just take food that you like well enough, but that is not unpleasant, but also not too pleasant. And that's missing the point. The point is, as he says, the middle way is when you reflect mindfully. So if you have very coarse and terrible food, obviously you can reflect mindfully, and then you're practicing the middle way. And if you have very delicious food that you really like, but you're mindful about it, you're also practicing the middle way. Why the middle way looks like this, not picking any food, is quite simple and quite obvious. Because if you were to seek out either way, it's not possible to be mindful. It's a replacement, or it's getting in the way of you actually being mindful. At the moment when you're mindful, it looks like being moderate about everything, or about most things, because you stop paying attention to that. You stop seeking out one or the other. Your mind is preoccupied with being mindful. Mindfulness isn't moderation, but it looks like that. And this is why being reasonable is a very important concept to help you get a sense of what it means to be mindful, or how you can start to become mindful. If you're just reasonable about it, you have food, well, it's reasonable, and it would be unreasonable if I sought out this food, or if I sought out any special food, particularly for no good reason, or for reasons like torturing myself or pleasuring myself, finding pleasure. That would be unreasonable. And you get to that because you're being mindful. As you're being mindful, it just seems like too much work to seek out food that is either unpleasant. I mean, start to see clearly that there's no real benefit in it. So it looks a lot like moderation, but the middle way is not moderation. The middle way is avoiding any kind of striving for good or bad things, seeking to hurt yourself, seeking to find pleasure. It really is being mindful. The point is that when you're mindful, you just avoid both. That's how the avoiding of the extremes comes about. That's why mindfulness is called the middle way.
How vision and knowledge are developed. Whoever practices the Noble Eightfold Path gains vision and knowledge. Here, vision and knowledge are the same meaning. The Dhamma is seen clearly as if by the eyes, hence it is called vision. Vision and knowledge cannot arise through sensual indulgence nor through self-mortification. They appear only by following the middle path. The development of vision and knowledge is very important. In the teaching of the Buddha, meditation is practiced for the purpose of developing the Eightfold Path.
Yeah, so you could say it both ways, that being more mindful makes you more reasonable, more moderate, let's say. But on the other hand, also being careful not to get into the extremes can support your mindfulness. If you're engaged in torturing yourself, you can't really be mindful. And if you're engaged in seeking out pleasurable indulgence, you also have a difficult time being. So it's also important the other way, before you practice mindfulness, to be a little bit moderate, such things. So for a beginner meditator, you don't want to be you want to be a little careful about indulging in pleasurable sensations, not because that's the middle way, but because it will be a distraction. And if you get caught up in craving and indulgence, it gets more difficult to be. But on the other hand, as you're mindful, you start to see this anyway, and it becomes more real and more real. Mindfulness is the middle way, not the moderation.
When the Eightfold Path is developed, the true nature of mind and matter is clearly discerned as if seen by the eyes. The arising and vanishing of mind and matter is also discerned truly as they occur. The impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self nature of all material and mental phenomena also becomes very clear, not through reading or listening to the teacher, but intuitively by experiencing it oneself. Finally, the nature of Nibbana, the quiescence of all physical and mental formations, the cessation of suffering in the cycle of existence, will be clearly seen and fully realized by one's own experience. It is important to scrutinize whether such personal realization has been attained. The meditators engaged in insight meditation, noting mind and matter at the moment of each arising and vanishing, the appearance of vision and knowledge is vivid. At the beginning of meditation, although the meditator notes the rising and falling of the abdomen, and sitting, touching, seeing, hearing, etc., every time each phenomenon occurs, no extraordinary knowledge is gained, as the power of concentration is not established yet.
At the lapse of a few days, the mind becomes tranquil and the power of concentration grows. The mind practically stops wandering to the other sensual objects. It remains riveted on the chosen object of meditation. At that time, the distinction between matter, rupa, the object of awareness, and mind, nama, the mental quality that takes note of it, becomes very pronounced. At the start of the meditation exercise, the meditator can hardly distinguish between the physical phenomenon of the rising and falling of abdomen and the mental act of noting the phenomenon. He or she remains under the impression that these separate phenomena are one and the same. As the concentration increases, the object of awareness becomes automatically differentiated with every noting from the mind that notes it. They appear separate and unmixed.
The knowledge then arises that this body is made up of only mind and matter. There is no living entity, and the two elements of material object and the knowing mind coexisting. This knowledge appears not through imagination, but as if is presented on the palm of the hand. Hence it is described also as vision, as if seen by the eyes. As concentration increases. No, please.
I have a question about this description as vision and knowledge. Are they trying to, is it trying to say it's an innate kind of visceral knowing when they use this word knowledge and vision? Is that what it means?
It's the same in English. It's remarkable how the two languages use the same idea. Honestly, as I think about it, Thai uses the same as well, and it's a completely different sort of language. Like if we say, what are your views on this topic? We don't mean, what do you see with your eyes about this topic, right? But we still use the word view. When we say we see things differently, we're not talking about vision with the eyes, right? We're talking about our understanding. When we say you'll have to see for yourself, we're saying you have to experience it for yourself. I can't explain it to you. You'll have to see for yourself. And we're not, I mean, maybe with the eyes, but that's, or we might say, see how it goes. We use the words about vision to describe experience. And that's the idea here. The word vision, it actually uses the word chakku, eye, which doesn't directly mean vision, in fact. Chakkungu dapadi. The eye, an eye arose. But again, it's chakku is another word that we don't use that in English, but they use the word eye to talk about vision. So it's as opposed to being told about it or thinking about it. It's the difference between first-hand knowledge and second-hand knowledge, or third-hand. Those are second. Difference between the special nature of first-hand knowledge.
I see. Yeah, the word knowledge, I guess, is for me a bit confusing because it sounds more intellectual.
Well, knowledge is the noun version of the verb know, to know, when you know something. There's different ways of knowing something. You can know something because I told you, and we say, yeah, I know, you told me already. You really know? I tell you about something that happened and you say, oh, I know, you told me about that already. You really know? Say that, we say you know, but that's knowing from hearing. If you think about it, I say, I think it's like this. I say, yeah, I know, I thought about it and I agree. That's still just from thinking about it. I know what you can say, I know it must be like that. I know it must be hard for you. That's just from thinking. If you didn't experience it, my troubles, you wouldn't know for sure that it's hard for me. But if I say, oh yes, this is very difficult, I say, I know, I did it, I tried it as well, it's very difficult. Then you really know. That's knowledge.
Mhm.
So it's just a word.
Thank you.
As concentration increases, the understanding arises that there is seeing because there is the eye and a sight to be seen. There is hearing because there is the ear and a sound. Bending because of the desire to bend. Stretching because of the desire to stretch. Movement because of the desire to move. There is craving because of ignorance about reality. There is attachment because of craving. And attachment motivates action, which in turn leads to beneficial or harmful results.
As concentration continues to grow, it is vividly seen that the object of awareness and the act of noting it arise and vanish as if under one's own eyes. Thus, the meditator will come to know very clearly that nothing is permanent, everything is unsatisfactory, and that there is only ungovernable, uncontrollable phenomena without any self, individual, or ego entity. When the meditator has fully developed this knowledge about the impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self nature of things, he or she will realize Nibbana, the cessation of all mental and physical formations, the end of all suffering, through the knowledge of the Noble Path, Arya Magga Jnana, which constitutes higher vision and higher knowledge.
Chi, it's your turn again.
Thus, the meditator who notes mind and matter constantly as they arise in accordance with the teaching of the Satipatthana Sutta becomes personally convinced that the Eightfold Path produces vision and knowledge as stated in the Discourse. It is clear that such direct personal experience of the truth, which constitutes higher knowledge, cannot be gained just by learning the Abhidhamma and pondering over its contents. No higher knowledge will arise by mere reflection on texts. In time when reflective contemplation is neglected, even the text will fade from memory, because it is only superficial knowledge gained through the exercise of intellect, not personal realization.
Yeah, it's a difficult point to get across to people who haven't practiced meditation. There's not a concept of a different kind of understanding. Obviously, there's never been any, for many people, there's never been any investigation. Even people who practice meditation have often only practiced it for attaining specific results, not for gaining wisdom, not for seeing reality. It would be for at best for seeing things like when you leave your body, astral projection, or remembering past lives, or things like that. So they would think of those as knowledge, and the Buddha called those knowledges, but it's not the knowledge that we're talking. It's there are people even in Sri Lanka, many people in Sri Lanka who have the idea that studying texts and even discussing perhaps texts is a way of getting all the way to Sotapanna, and get to Sotapanna by that. And it's absolutely impossible without very special previous practice. There are cases where people just heard the Buddha's teaching and became enlightened very, very quickly, like almost instantly. But that's because of the incredible amount of work they'd done before in this life or in past. This study of text is not enough simply because it doesn't allow you to let go. It doesn't lead to letting go. People who think it can lead to understanding, and well, this is I understand these things, so I must be getting closer to Sotapanna. They have this sense of studying leads to understanding, and understanding would lead to freedom. They miss the fact that the understanding that leads to freedom is understanding that causes you to let go. I guess I think even that's not enough, because they still think they're letting go. You can intellectually let go of something. You can say, yeah, I'll study this and it will lead me to let go. If you haven't done actual mindfulness practice, you can't see the depth. Only it's like standing in a mud puddle and saying you're swimming. No depth. When you get in a pool and you say, oh, this is what swimming is like, a whole different thing.
Knowledge deepens through practice. If the middle path is practiced to gain direct personal experience, it is usual that knowledge deepens as time goes on. At one time, Venerable Ananda had paid a visit to the Bhikkhunis monastery, who recounted to him that they dwelt practicing the 4 foundations of mindfulness and that their knowledge of the Dhamma deepened with the passing of time. Venerable Ananda agreed and said, "It is usually so. When Venerable Ananda reported this to the Blessed One said, "It is so, Ananda. If any bhikkhu or bhikkhuni dwells in the practice of the four foundations of mindfulness, it is to be expected that they will come to know the noble truths more deeply." The explanation of the commentary. The commentary explained that the knowledge gained at first was concerned with the discernment of the four primary elements, whereas the later enhanced knowledge arose out of discernment of the derived elements, upada rupa. Similarly, knowledge about all the material elements, rupa, is allowed by the contemplation and discernment of the mental elements, nama. Likewise, knowledge about mind and matter is followed by discernment about their cause. Knowledge about the causes that give rise to mind and matter is followed by discernment of the three characteristics of their impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and insubstantiality. Thus the knowledge that arises first leads on to higher knowledge later.
That passage about the bhikkhunis is in the Samyutta Nikaya, Satipatthana Samyutta, Bhikkhunupaseya Sutta.
In the practice of body contemplation, ayana upasana, according to the Sotapanna Sutta, one begins with noting material forms while in the process of going, standing, sitting, lying, bending, stretching, moving, etc. This amounts to noting the characteristics of the air element, Vayodhatu, namely its quality of pushing, distending, and moving. Only after thoroughly understanding the nature of the primary elements can one discern the workings of the derived elements, such as the eye, sight, ear, sound, by noting, seeing, hearing, etc. Having mastered the nature of all material forms, attention is next given to the arising of mind and mental formations. In this way, superior knowledge appears in sequence. Starting from any stage. Having learned the definition and descriptions of mind, matter, etc., from the Abhidhamma text, one can start from the derived elements instead of from the primary elements. It is possible too to begin with mind before investigating matter. Putting aside mind and matter, one can start considering causes and effects according to the law of dependent origination, or contemplating the phenomena of arising and vanishing, or the three characteristics, the phenomena of arising
The
and
type of
vanishing.
it should be the phenomena of arising or vanishing, or the three characteristics. He's got a copy and paste problem there. Sorry to interrupt. But if it was confusing you as you were reading it, that's okay. Now this paragraph confused me at first. This isn't actually telling you to do that. As I understand this, we'll read the next paragraphs, you'll see why, but this is not saying you as a meditator you can do this. He's saying for someone studying, of course you can start anywhere. When you're for study, you can study the three characteristics, you can study arising and vanishing. And this might not be clear to you, but arising and vanishing is like the fourth stage of knowledge. So that's what he's referring to there. And he's setting it up because he's saying in study you could start with the fourth stage of knowledge. You could of course think about or contemplate arising and ceasing, dependent origination. Pretty clear what he's saying if you read the next paragraphs, is that this is not, because at first I thought he's saying you can practice in this way. That would be interesting. He's pretty clearly not, because it would be, well, he's going to say that it would be, but the point is you have to start from the beginning, and not just with body and mind. You really should start with body first. Now you could be mindful of the mind. It's not wrong because body and mind are both fine. But it's much more difficult. And the Visuddhimagga says, start with the body, because as the physical becomes clear, non-physical becomes clear. Function. That's why we start, like when a person starts to meditate, we focus mostly on them keeping their mind with the foot when they walk and with the stomach when they sit. That's the basic exercise. As they do that, of course, obviously they're going to start to see the mind. You couldn't do these things he's saying as a practical. I read the next paragraph. It's actually saying.
Some say that it is a slow process to begin with the analytical knowledge of mind and matter, nama rupa paricheda jnana. It would be much quicker to begin with the awareness of arising and passing away, udayabhaya jnana, and the knowledge of dissolution, bhanga jnana. They even say they prefer the quicker method.
So the other thing to note is that in some texts, I think the canonical texts that mention these, there's a place where the Udayabhaya is the first vipassana jnana. And so we recognize that the first three jnanas, because Udayabhaya is the fourth, the first three are not technically vipassana jnanas, because the texts call Udayabhaya jnana the first vipassana jnana, which is probably a reason why people would argue this, say, well, start with Udayabhaya jnana. Not the proper way, let's put it that way. But the other thing is, someone who's gone through the 16 stages of knowledge once, it's reasonable for them to start at Udayabhaya jnana. The way our tradition does it, start the meditator at Udayabhaya jnana. There's really not need to go back to nama jnana. Not in any appreciable amount. Start with Udayabhaya jnana after going through the 16 stages of knowledge once.
But although he will go on and explain that this is about studying, I still don't understand why it's explained as quickly, like this way is quickly, this way is not so quick. It still sounds like talking about practice.
This part is. So the paragraph before was saying if you're studying, you can start anywhere. And then this paragraph we just read, some say that in practice, you could start with Udayabhaya Jnana. You could begin by examining arising and ceasing. Or you could say, well, yeah, I mean, we could somehow, as our path, start with Udayabhaya Jnana by contemplating. But the thing is, practically speaking, you have to start at Namarupa Parijnana, and there's no other way. If you don't see the separation of body and mind, you can't possibly see them arising and ceasing. The point of Namarupa Parijnana is it's the point where the mind makes a shift from seeing concepts of people and places and things and entities of all kinds, seeing actual experiences that arise and cease. Seeing what's actually there. If you don't actually open the door to seeing what's actually there, you'll never get to Udayabhaya Jnana. So from a theoretical perspective, you could start with Udayabhaya Jnana if you want to do that, some kind of studying, contemplating intellectually.
Thank you.
So all he's saying is it would be quicker if you started at the fourth knowledge. Why start at the first knowledge? And I was pointing out the reason why that seems ridiculous. Why would you start at the fourth knowledge? It's called the fourth for a reason, but in some texts, it's referred to as the first. Udayabhaya Jnana is the first vipassana.
However, studying mind and matter and their definitions and descriptions from the texts and beginning to contemplate them, starting from wherever one wishes, will not give rise to true insight. Consequently, the arising of a later knowledge superior to the precedent one, in accordance with the teaching, cannot be experienced this way. Just as a student increases the retentive power of the text he has learned by rote, by repetitive recitation, so too such practice will help only remember the definitions and descriptions of mind and matter. No extraordinary insight will result from such practice.
It has come to our knowledge that at a well-known meditation center, attempt was made to go through the whole series of various stages of knowledge development just by following the stages step by step as they have learned from the text. After reaching the stage of knowledge of equanimity about formations, Sankarupeka Jnana, a difficulty was encountered when they come to the stages of knowledge of adaptation, Anuloma Jnana, maturity knowledge, Gotrabhu Jnana, path knowledge, Magga Jnana, and fruition knowledge, Phala Jnana. So they had to go back to the beginning. This is an example to show that insight cannot be realized by shortcuts.
That's a funny idea of trying to intellectually get to Maggaphala Nibbana, get to Nibbana. Good example. I mean, it may not, if you're not familiar with these things, it may not seem very, very clear what he's talking about, but the idea that somehow you could get to Nibbana by thinking about it, it's absurd. And so, yes, of course, when they get to Sankarupeka Jnana, you can fake that to some extent. It's nothing like real Sankarupeka Jnana, but you can fake it. You can't fake Anuloma Maggaphala Nibbana. Anuloma Gotrabhu. Mostly because they're moments. You know, they're specific moments, like the spark of a fire. Either sparks or it doesn't. You can't will the fire to spark. Stages of knowledge are just a observation of the natural course of the mind, which only goes in one way. It only happens in one way. It doesn't happen in different ways. I mean, it's referring to a specific process. So that process happens the way that process happens, and it happens always that way. I mean, it can look differently to some extent, but there's noticeable qualities that are required because it has to be step by step by step. It has to happen. When ice turns to steam, you can't just turn ice into steam, it has to melt first. Melting shrinks it to water. Water starts to bubble and boil, and then
By practicing meditation in accordance with Satipatthana Sutta and developing the Noble Eightfold Path, one is bound to experience deeper knowledge after each precedent knowledge as stated in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. Vision arose, a knowledge arose.
Leading to peace. The middle path also leads to peace, upasamaya, the tranquilizing of defilements. In one who develops the Eightfold Path, the defilements are tranquilized. The path of insight produces momentary tranquility, while the Noble Path brings about the complete annihilation of defilements. Sensual indulgence does not lead to the cessation of defilements, but helps to increase them. Once one gives in to the temptation of sensual enjoyment, craving for repeated gratification results. Getting one sense object leads to the desire to possess more. Satisfying one craving develops more craving, and there is no end to craving. One only has to observe the rich people of developed countries. They have everything that they need, yet they are never satisfied. There is no end to their desires. It is obvious that sensual indulgence does not promote the cessation of defilements, but only multiplies them. Self-mortification also does not lead to the end of defilements. The practitioners of this method may believe that exposure to extreme cold, extreme heat, and strict fasting tend to remove defilements, but in fact, it is one's lowered vitality as a result of extreme practices that keeps the defilements in check. During serious illness or suffering from painful diseases, when the physical strength is at a low ebb, defilements remain dormant. However, once normal health and strength is regained, after the illness, desires for sensual gratification make their appearance as usual.
I'll just read one more paragraph. Thus, after giving up the practice of self-mortification, or stopping the practice for some time, when vitality returns, defilements also return as before. Even while self-mortification is being practiced, although gross defilements remain suppressed, subtle defilements continue to arise. There will be desire for comfort, free from the discomfort and pain of austerity. Defilements of wrong view of self, I practice austerity, are bound to arise. The wrong view of conceit, no one else can do such practice, and the wrong belief that the practice will lead to liberation.
Thank you for reading, everyone.
Bad.
So we will stop our reading here, and we will continue now with questions, and everyone on Discord is invited who has a microphone to also ask their questions with your mic on, or if you have a comment on the text we've read. And the YouTube chat, you can also start asking your questions if it's about Buddhism, meditation practice. I just want to make a remark, Bhante, about the last part. It kind of is something I think you mentioned before, that it still sounds like here, to me at least, that the way of self-mortification goes a little bit towards helping with your actual practice. Like, if your defilements are weak, doesn't it still help if you immediately switch over to Vipassana, for example?
Well, the problem is your other faculties, the positive ones, are also weak. You're really fasting. It's hard to have the strength of mind to develop mindfulness as well. And besides that, the negative effects of intentionally torturing yourself, as he said, there's going to be desire to stop, craving for you can't get rid of the craving for not doing what you're doing, but also it's hurting yourself. You're intentionally inflicting pain, which is anger based. There's going to be anger involved. You're trying to harm yourself, cultivate resentment, and also control. The control involved with trying to hurt yourself, trying to inflict, or trying to remove any pleasure, any liking. Can't like it, so purposefully trying to control the mind, which is delusion. A lot of bad stuff you're cultivating that. So no, it's not really helpful. I mean, some of what we do as say Buddhist monks or meditators goes in the direction of that. It's only because from a meditator perspective, ordinary behavior is, we don't need to eat nearly as much food as we do. Do all the things we do. So some level of austerity is the middle way, or is in line with the middle.
Thank you, Bhante. Yes, maybe I'm just repeating what you said last time, but so wouldn't it still be closer to be on the side of self-torturing yourself than indulging in sensual pleasures than if you want to, if you change towards the real practice, which is like when we talk about vipassana, that the
I was
last
thinking
one.
more of the discipline involved. There's a lot of discipline involved in torturing yourself. So I think to some extent that, but thinking about it, it's not really. It's just so it's eclipsed by the unwholesomeness of torturing yourself.
Yeah, maybe there's not much goodness in trying to see the positive sides of it. So yeah, I'll stop here. Sorry.
Ante, the first question we have: how should one go about spending time with family and friends who aren't meditators and still partake in indulgence? I also feel a sense of aversion to such situations.
Again, the indulgence isn't the engaging in activities. Indulgence is the liking of it and wanting it, and it's indulgence also to get upset about it. These are both the extremes. They're not the middle way. But if you're mindful of them, then you could say you're on the middle way, or getting towards the middle way. It's as all things in the world, you can approach it by being reasonable. You have to ask yourself what is reasonable, and well, probably you don't quite know what is reasonable, but take that point of view as I'm going to figure out what's reasonable, and I'm going to do that. Remember that what's reasonable isn't just what everyone else thinks is reasonable. It's reasonable to have a glass of wine. It's reasonable to dance and sing. I mean, these are not reasonable things just because people think they're. It's reasonable to fish and hunt and kill mosquitoes. It's not reasonable, but neither is dismissing out of hand people in your family, rejecting out of hand the people around you, rejecting good food, rejecting clothing. Reasonable is somewhere in the middle. You'll only find it by being mindful. But if you don't take that perspective, it's easy for Buddhists to become very extreme, rejecting everything and criticizing everything. Oh, look at you engaging in indulgence, you terrible people. And that impedes your mindfulness. It's hard to develop mindfulness if you're not reasonable. You have to understand this idea of being reasonable, being the way the Buddha was, and then apply mindfulness, and you'll be able to find harmony in your conventional life as a human being with your experience as a meditator, as moments of experience arising. And
Ante, the next question: I often have some problems with watching an object, like a pressure, for example, until it disappears. I often get distracted by another object, like a thought or sound. Is that a problem?
so we don't encourage you to note everything until it disappears. We encourage you to note pain until it disappears, or pleasure, to note the hindrances until they disappear. Pain, pleasure, and calm, we encourage you to note until they disappear, and the hindrances, and visions, but visions in the mind, because they're the sorts of things that are likely to lead to distraction. If you're not vigilant about them, it's easy to be excited about visions. Like meditators often see bright lights, they just come out of nowhere. It's important that you note them until they disappear, because it's easy for the mind to get excited and intoxicated by them, like get entranced by them, caught up in them. Other things you can just note a few times until just go back to the rising and falling.
The next question, Bante. Could you clarify a bit on noting knowing? When should we use it? Or when should we use thinking? I mean, what characteristics does it have? How can I recognize it?
Well, thinking is pretty clear. Thinking is when there's a thought. When there's a thought, you say thinking. For knowing, it's just a general means of noting, well, noting the awareness of something. If you think to yourself, oh, that just happened, well, that saying that is there's a knowing involved there. So you can say to yourself, knowing.
The next question, Bante. One late night, I was meditating in my room, and after a while I felt an incredible surge of white light flowing into me, and it felt very good. I felt my whole surrounding was brightened. What was that?
Obasa. I mean, that's the word we give to it. Obasa really just means light, but we have a term for it. It's one of the 10 vipassanupakilesa. It's categorized as a imperfection, not exactly imperfection, but a cause for corruption, let's say that. As you like it, as it distracts you from being mindful. Which is again why it's very important that when you see something that you're not seeing, it disappears. Not seeing with your eyes open, but with your eyes closed, seeing something, let's say imaginary or hallucinatory, but we don't use those words. It's real. It really is seeing. That's all it is. The problem is we're always meaning making. We think it was something. What was that I saw? The answer is light. It was, you saw light. That's what you saw. There was seeing. Or yeah, the correct answer is there was an experience of seeing. And that's why we say to ourselves, seeing is important. And if there's liking, then before that you should be noting the liking. should say liking, like trying to create clarity and keep the mind in the realm of actual experience. As soon as you start saying, what was that? You're in the realm of concept, because it was what it was. It was an experience of. But our mind thinks, yeah, but what was behind it, you know? And that's the key, is there is nothing behind things. Things are what they are. Seeing is seeing, hearing is hearing. A very different way of looking at the world than we're normally used, where we give things meaning.
The next question, Bante. I was told by a Vipassana teacher that while more practice generally equals more practice also equals more risk. What is your view on this?
Risk. Well, you may be taking something out of context or generalizing something that was very specific. So, I mean, I could imagine a case where this is true, but it doesn't. Exactly as you're saying it, it's absolutely wrong. There's no correlation between more practice. There's no general correlation between more practice and more risk. Like, you can't just make an equation like that. What you can say is there comes a point where you hit your limit, and if from there you practice more frequently, let's say, you take on risk. But it's not risk. It's not like there's a rolling a dice and there's a random chance that something bad happens. It's that you start to not even risk, you start to lose the advantage and gain some disadvantages because you're pushing yourself. So there's negative qualities that arise. Not really a risk so much as a corruption. Same goes with practicing not enough. Well, not the same, but you can also say. So there is an optimum amount. It's not the more you practice, the better it is. There comes a point where you really shouldn't practice more than that. And it's not an amount, it's you knowing for yourself. Like my teacher insisted that after sitting well, almost always insisted that after sitting meditation you should break. So do walking, sitting. After sitting, don't start walking again. You shouldn't generally do walking, sitting, walking, sitting, walking, sitting. Always take a break after sitting, that kind of thing. Because if you did more than that, if you did do walking, sitting, there's stress. You're introducing stress. There's a potential for a problem. There should be a rest period. I mean, you should still be mindful in between. And I guess that's the other thing is, if we're talking strictly about mindfulness, by practice you mean being mindful, then absolutely it can be from the moment you wake up till the moment you go to sleep, and it can even be without sleep. You could practice day and night with no sleep, mindful, if you're really at that level, and there's no risk of anything. I mean, mindfulness is the one thing that really, one type of meditation that really poses no risk of anything. Being mindful poses no risk. It's the formal practice. Too much of it at some point again becomes problematic, but it's not the mindfulness. Mindfulness is always useful, and there's no limit to how. As it's phrased, that's not a great statement. It's not a good statement at all.
The next question, Bante. What is the first stage of knowledge?
First stage of knowledge is none of your business. No, it's something that you should discover with the help of a teacher. That's the best way. Not the kind of thing you should be learning about intellectually, or from books. Kind of thing you should be looking up. The more you get into looking it up, the more obstacles you're putting in front of you, ruining the potential for organic investigation and discovery. But we have an at-home meditation course. You undertake that, and as a result, we say, the Mahasi Sayadaw said, over a few days you'll come to the first stage of knowledge, but we would thereby say if you're practicing 1 hour a day, you might after a few weeks come to the same general sort of realization. Assuming you're also being mindful during the day and keeping the 5 precepts.
The next question, Bante. Do mayas disturb the meditators who practice at home more so than those who practice at a proper meditation center with the closer guidance of a teacher?
Don't use that word Maya. That's a term used more by Hindus. We use the word Maya to mean when someone is deceptive, I think, or self-aggrandizing is, I think, what the word Maya is used to refer to. But there are lots of challenges and problems with practicing at home. It's inferior in pretty much every way from practicing in a meditation. I want to be clear that it was said at the beginning of this session, and it's said at the beginning of every session, that we're renovating here. It makes it sound like our center isn't open. The renovations are ongoing in one section, but we have a whole other section where we've made all these rooms and they're all empty. Well, we have 2 meditators at the moment, but they're leaving soon. We have 12, 14 rooms. We have one yellow-robed nun. I don't have a word for her. I wouldn't say she's not. I don't think she's a bhikkhuni. I think she might be a samaneri. I'm not sure. But she's here. She's older. She's practicing here. Center. We also have one monk who's visiting, who came to see me to ask questions about Thailand. He's from India. We have lots of empty rooms, so it's not an easy trip for many people to make, but hey, my parents are both coming to visit, I think. They can come, and they're quite old. I think it's a great place to visit, especially if you're interested in
Thank you for sharing that, Bhante. The next question: should I make the hindrances the primary object of my meditation rather than the rising and falling? They are constant, and there is never a moment when they are not present in some way.
Well, if they're there, you should note them. If there's many different things all at once, you can note overwhelmed or distracted. It's one of the hindrances. If they're there, you should note them. But every time they disappear, go back to the rising and falling during sitting meditation. You have to build the habit of going back. After you build that habit, eventually your mind will have strength to not suppress, but to avoid the arising of the hindrances, to experience things without the arising of the hindrances. It just takes practice. It takes time and patience, persistence. Another thing is it often seems like things are always there, but they're not. And get a greater clarity about that as well. You'll start to notice when they're actually there and not. At the very least, you'll start to see them arising. At the very beginning, you'll start to see them arising and ceasing. See that the hindrances aren't constant. They're also arising and ceasing.
The next question, Bhante. If you note suffering in meditation, is noting enough? Or should you still take steps to correct that suffering in your life? For example, if you live in a bad neighborhood/country, should you try to change it?
You don't note suffering, you note the experience of pain or the experience of disliking some reality. You're pointing to two different things, which is good. Good to be able to understand that there are these two different levels, but they are two different levels. The experience, you don't experience suffering. I mean, not as we say it, like you say there's suffering living in a certain place. Like suppose you're living in war-torn region or something. You could say it's so much suffering living here, and I'm experiencing so much suffering, but what you're actually experiencing is more complicated than that. So you might experience physical pain, you might experience fear, you might experience worry, you might experience disliking. These are all different experiences. The actual suffering is more conceptual. It's not real. It's not actually actual experience. Experience is again more complicated. But when you get into the realm of concepts, like there's so much suffering here, living here is just so much suffering, get into the realm of, again, trying to be reasonable. You should find what is truly reasonable. Means what has reason is reason. And reason comes from being mindful. It comes from the wisdom, clarity of mind. It comes from mindful. You absolutely should be mindful. As far as fixing things, just appreciate that you have to be reasonable about that. And mindfulness will help you be more reasonable, more and more reasonable. There's two different levels, and so I can't answer the question about whether you should take steps to correct something. Say try to be reasonable and find a way to do what is reasonable. That allows you to apply mindfulness to every situation, as opposed to having rules like I should do this, I shouldn't do that. Rules you have are ethical rules. You shouldn't kill or steal or cheat or lie. With everything else, even with those, it's just being reasonable. It's not reasonable to do those things.
The next question, Bhante. When I see vivid, unfamiliar faces in meditation, I note them as seeing. Could this be connected to past lives or just other layers of the mind?
Could be this, could be that, but from a perspective of mindfulness, it's important not to get caught up in speculation. Again, you're trying to find the meaning behind things, and things don't have meaning behind them. Not in any real sense. Whatever meaning we can find, explanations or origins, is all conceptual. Well, in the past, right? Present is only very simple. Seeing is seeing.
The next question, Bhante. After liking something, I enter in a loop of I'm not worthy to practice. I'm not noble. That causes me to actually practice less. I kind of shy away. What would you recommend? I note guilt and thinking.
Well, it just means that things are more complicated than just liking. There's liking, but there's also disliking yourself, disliking the fact that you like. Probably you haven't mentioned disliking, right? You should note disliking. Guilt is usually just disliking of some sort. It can be worry as well, worry. So you might want to note those. But you don't have to stop any of it. Big deal. The big thing is to understand that we're not trying to stop or change or fix. We're trying to understand. And understanding fixes everything. You wouldn't engage in these loops if you had wisdom. Kind of harsh if you understood them. And the great thing is that you can just try to understand them. And that's the big change that we mostly have to undergo, is stop trying to fix and control. Start trying to understand.
Bhante, the next question. During daily life, how would one decide on an anchor point when performing an activity? Example, noting seeing when scanning papers.
So the best anchor point is the four postures: walking, standing, sitting, and lying. That's where you'd always start. during an activity, then you apply to the minor postures. The body is still the best way. But if your body is stationary, you can just note standing. But if your mind is focused on seeing papers move when you scan them, then yeah, seeing is great. And in fact, that's true because, or it's also true that the four postures are an anchor, but also the senses are another anchor. So seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, thinking do constitute a good anchor as well. That's what we generally encourage meditators to focus on outside of meditation practice, and all the minor things are just sort of secondary. You can note them, that's great, but most important or most basic to focus on the four postures and the six senses. Seeing is absolutely good. Work.
The next question, Bhante. According to Buddhism, is there a god or goddess?
Have any more practical questions?
The next question, Bhante. I caught myself in an attempt to beautify my aging body by pulling out the newly appeared white-colored chest hair. What advice can you give so I can be compassionate instead of averse?
Compassion isn't described as something you apply towards yourself. I think it's a little bit deceptive to try and be compassionate towards yourself. Self, I don't know what the word is. In Thai, they would say you could say it's getting on your own side, being your own lawyer kind of thing. In other words, making excuses for yourself. Compassion for yourself. Compassion is something that we use on others to avoid being cruel. You can be cruel to yourself, and that's where it's often applied, but not really how we apply it in Buddhism. It's because it's pretty simple, you know. There's processes in your mind that are causing you to pull out your chest hairs. You have to identify them. You don't need compassion. You just need mindfulness. The desire, the worry, the disliking. Mindful. And this is, again, why we focus on the body first. Focus on the movements of the body, focus on the stomach rising and falling. Because seeing those things is not easy. You don't notice them, seeing the mental qualities. As you start to pay attention to simple physical experiences, you'll notice your habits. You'll notice all these kinds of habits would lead you to do things, pull out your chest hair. You'll notice those habits in other contexts, in the context of watching your stomach rising and falling, in the context of watching your foot, context of ordinary experience. That's all you need. And compassion isn't a core part of the Buddhist teaching, a core part of Buddhist practice. It is a Buddhist practice. It's just not core, like metta, karuna, loving kindness, compassion. These are good. They're really best seen as auxiliary practice. Like if you're cruel, if you're by nature cruel and wish other people harm, then compassion can be good to help you sort of curb that. If you're unfriendly, then kindness, friendliness, metta is valuable. They are valuable, but only as supportive meditations. That's how they're best understood. And directed towards others, not really directed at yourself. Not really the purpose of them. They're best used because they, as supportive, because they let you dismiss that part of your life. You know, we get caught up with cruelty and unfriendliness, build grudges, you know, and build this connection with conceptual reality, with other people. With the best way to use compassion and friendliness is towards those people, so you can neutralize that. And once it's neutralized, you can just remove that from the equation. Like when you have a math equation and you subtract of +6, you subtract 6 and it's gone. Neutralize it. I can answer the God question. I mean, I wasn't going to dismiss it out of hand if that's all we've got. Does Buddhism have a god or a goddess? It really depends what you mean by those things. Buddhism is the teaching that leads to freedom from suffering. Did the Buddha talk about beings that would be considered gods in other religions? Sort of. Talked about beings, and those beings would probably be deemed gods or goddesses by other religions, but Buddhist perspective, they're just beings, and they also are reborn after a very long. But the Buddhist teaching is about suffering, the cause of suffering, cessation of suffering, and the path that leads to cessation. That's what he taught. Anything to do with God or goddess.
Ante, the next question. If the brain of an arahant is damaged, how would it affect their enlightenment?
Wouldn't. There are some strange things that happen with brain damage, but wouldn't be a conscious thing. Like there could be, I guess, I'm just guessing, there could be some artifacts where it would be completely brain-based activity that might seem like greed or anger, I suppose. I'm not even sure about that. There are just weird things that happen with brain damage. But my guess is it would be just very different for an arahant. People's personality change for brain damage. Anyway, it's all speculative. The holidays we break with family, probably have fewer people to.
Bante, the next question. May I ask it? I am dying of cancer and have been meditating at home all day, every day. Do you have any tips for going through the dying process without becoming confused and distraught?
Well, if that's mindfulness. If I don't know if you're practicing the way we teach, but you are, that's the best way. Be ready for death. Because death will just be one more experience. It's a very monumentous experience, a very important experience, but the quality of it is still just experiential. So, like any other experience, there's a big difference between being mindful of it and reacting. The moment of death, if you're mindful, if you have that capacity to be mindful, you've developed it, are skilled in it, and the moment is a pure moment. Felt as one of goodness, felt as one of happiness, clarity and peace, purity. Much mystery to it. It's great to hear you're meditating all day, every day. I guess I would say be open to change, changing your views. Don't go into it with preconceived ideas about meditation or what you're going to see or what to expect. Be open to be challenged by it. The other thing is make sure you have a teacher if you can. Be practicing on your own as for a beginner is not very beneficial. It's just so easy to get lost and you don't really know what you're looking for. So we have an at-home course. Done that, but if you haven't, that's a good way to go. Sure you have some contact with teacher and some regimen to follow. Yeah, most important to understand that death is just another experience. So if you're getting good at facing experiences, then death won't be any different. You'll be ready for death.
The next question, Bante. Could you give some advice about fear? I'm a bit new to facing it, so it still looks like a big deal to me. I just want to run away from it and not look it in the eyes. What do I need to make sure that I note for it?
Yes, note the fear. One thing we don't often realize is when you note something, the result is change. I mean, the change happens anyway, but the next thing is change. So you might say, I noted it, but it didn't work. It became overwhelming, or I got overwhelmed, or wanted to run away from it, or so on. That's just change, you know? So you noted the fear, good job. The skill is keeping up with the change. What happens next? So then you want to run away from it, or you feel overwhelmed by it. You note those things. Try after you note things to go back to ordinary experience, like watching the stomach rise and fall, or movements of the body, the walking. And then if it comes back again, the fear comes back, you note it again. But if there's anything else, you note that as well. Wanting to run away, or want to get rid of it, or disliking. It can be disliking, you can dislike the fear. You can be afraid of the fear. Note that fear. So the skill is keeping up, and you through practice, you'll see that there isn't anything overwhelming. There's just moments. And so usually when you get overwhelmed is you stop noting. You're not noting the next thing. You say, hey, I noted fear and that didn't work. Well, this must be not working. You give up, kind of. The mind just gives up in that moment and then is overwhelmed because you're not being mindful anymore. But if you can let go of that fear because it's already gone and now you're into something else, you want the fear to go away or you dislike the fear, note those things. Fear comes back, then you note it. At that, and you'll see there's nothing that you can't face. You have to be flexible. You have to be dancing. Keep up with the changes. Keep up with the rhythm, or not the rhythm. It's not a rhythm, but the pace. And slack off or fall behind. You can't say, "Oh, that fear in the past," you know. Fear, if it's in the past, it's not fear anymore. It's a memory. It's gone.
The next question, Bante. Given how common self-directed aversion is, wouldn't cultivating self-compassion be a skillful way to abandon dosa and support right effort rather than something merely auxiliary?
Well, the text suggests that it's not really effective. And as I said, it's kind of indulgent. It has the potential to be indulgent. There's no real instruction. And as I was trying to explain, the reason for practicing compassion in the first place is to free you from that realm of interpersonal relations. As we get caught up, we get obsessed with other people, wanting to hurt other people or disliking other people. And that's what these qualities are for. These practices are really for. Self-compassion is not on that level. Talking about there's an emotion has arisen. You want to be free from that emotion. Prop yourself up. You say, I'm actually a really good person. Wish for yourself to be happy. It's not really doing what compassion towards others do, which free you from that obsession with other people. Kind of reinforces your view, your idea of yourself. And again, compassion towards others and kindness towards others isn't the solution either. Just a sort of an auxiliary, supportive meditation. When you're obsessed with other people, bad way. Much simpler, more effective on a personal level to reframe the issue in terms of actual experiences. Hate yourself, for example, you just deconstruct that, take it as hate. Wish yourself harm, wanting. People want to cut themselves, and I don't know that that's really hatred. It's just a desire to feel something. And you can note those desires of wanting. Passion isn't really the way. You won't find that in any text, primary text. The Visuddhimagga talks about using it as an example. May I be happy, but it points out that it's not really that. Either way, not.
Bhante, the next question. Sometimes things change so quickly that I can't note everything. How do I handle it in this situation?
That's when you'd note distracted. It means your mind is not settled, unsettled or distracted or restless or however it appears to you.
Bhante, the last question that we have. How is the meditation center progressing currently? Do you have any updates for us, Bhante?
Meditation center is open. We have rooms, we have food. The only real thing we're missing is a dining area for meditators. So that's next on our priority list, I think. Meditators are currently eating here or there. There's different places they can eat. It's not a huge deal, but I want to make a dedicated place with tables and chairs and nice, clean an area where meditators will have to worry so much, or not have to have it be a complicated affair. Simple. You take your food, you know where to sit, you go and sit there, you eat, you clean up afterwards, and that's it. But apart from that, we have everything. We're open. We're here. I think it will take time. I mean, I think things change and people come and go. We'll have to see what people are like now, and for the new people who are looking for this sort of thing, and people who will find us. Just we'll build a community. I think I've been moving around too much to really build a strong community. It goes without saying. And I try not to move around, but that doesn't work. So we're doing well so far. 2 years. No, not quite 2 years, right? Year and a half. Year and a half in the same place is pretty good. So like I'll be going over time. We'll build up a good center here. There's still lots of work to be done. I mean, not the only thing. There's other rooms we're building, and we want to renovate the office building or the storeroom building to make it nicer and better to keep supplies. There's paths we want to make. There's the 3-story building at the top floor. We want to make a meditation hall, an open meditation area on the 3rd floor of this new building, which will be high up. So there's not many mosquitoes here anyway, but there will be basically no mosquitoes because it's so high up. There aren't many mosquitoes here anyway, but it will also be quiet, kind of just a spot. Quiet here anyway. It's a good quiet spot, but it will just be the perfect meditation place up at the top. I want to build that. I want to make that before the other rooms because it's to have a dedicated meditation area down here for meditators. Lots of things. If and when we get a community, we build a community and staying here long term, we probably will look more closely at the school idea. I did initiate this project of building a school here, but then we lost some monks and not many people coming, so that changes. Probably the school we put on the back burner. We might build a Dhamma school and lots of future potential. We're open. The update is that we're open. Rooms. Come and stay. Come and live here. Want to teach kids? If anyone out there wants to teach kids basic Dhamma, basic Buddhism in English, got lots of kids to teach. A great service to Buddhism by teaching English Buddhism to the kids.
Bhante, we've passed our 2nd hour mark, so we will end our Dhamma session there. Just want to take this moment to thank you that we really appreciate your time for answering everyone's questions. Thank you so much for your insight and wisdom like always. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you to the group for making this possible. Appreciate all the work that you do and press upon you the goodness. Take time to reflect upon goodness that is cultivated here and how valuable that is for practice, part of our practice, as support for our practice. All for your patience and perseverance and coming out week after week to present this text, the Dhamma, to the people. Thank you for everyone who asks questions, especially those who have questions about their practice. It's not a good sign. Not a good sign if you have lots of questions about your practice, but it's an absolutely necessary part. The sign that you have issues, right? It's not a good sign. Good sign is when you ask all these questions. After you've asked them and gotten your answers, then you have fewer questions. It wouldn't be a good sign if you had questions and you didn't ask them. Doesn't mean it's bad to ask the questions. It means you better ask these questions. So that's the best. It's the best to see that, because it means that we can be of great benefit. That's why we want questions that are of importance to the person asking, so that they too can become those who no longer have any questions. Because long-term meditators have fewer and fewer questions. They get the important ones answered and realize that the ones that are not lose a lot of their questions. Appreciate that people are coming. I mean, it's great that this opportunity to answer people's questions. Hopefully, some of the answers mean that in the future you'll have fewer questions. Greater confidence and understanding answers that you need yourself through the practice. Appreciate everyone who just came out and watched. Again, just being here. We all have no doubt. There's no question that what we're doing, it's not a bragging about it. This isn't so special in relation to other Buddhist practices, Buddhist groups, but it is special in that it is a Buddhist group. It is the Dhamma. We have no doubt about that. So it is a great time for that what we're doing here. Wholesome. This wholesomeness to be found, wholesome. Being here, appreciating, listening, not listening, but taking part, even that, even without listening. Even if you just came and you realized, oh, it's already over, I missed it. But you didn't miss it, you came. And those people, maybe there are people who are watching this later on YouTube. Even that. It's just seeking out something good. Awesomeness. So through the power of all of that, all of the good deeds that I have done in the past, the spirit of that to you to appreciate the deeds that you have all done at this time, and I appreciate that, and yes, earnest wish that we all appreciate our goodness and each other's goodness. That goodness, along with the greatness of the Buddha, the Sangha, protect us, support us, safe from danger, safe from enmity, safe from physical and mental suffering. Progress on the Buddha, on the path of the Dhamma, to realize the Dhamma for ourselves, to all of the wisdom and knowledge that is to be had from direct realization of the Buddha's teaching for ourselves. Peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering. Sadhu.
Thank you so much, Bhante. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.